Ah, hi Andrew, can you hear us? Oh, hold on. Are you able to unmute?
Thomas, I can hear you.
Great, thank you so much. Sorry to keep you waiting.
Please don't worry about it, it's fine.
Just letting all our members join. Thank you very much for your time this evening. As president, I'm really delighted to welcome you to Loughborough Debate Society. Today's event will really be a chance for you to introduce yourself, to talk about your journey into politics. We'll have time for questions from our members that we've chosen. At the end, if there's any more time as well, we'll have some time for some more questions. But again, thank you very much for your time this evening, and we're really looking forward to the event. So it's really over to you. Thank you.
Not at all, Thomas. Thank you very much, and thank you, Loughborough, for the invitation to speak this evening. It's always a pleasure to, one of the great things, one of the few very good things about lockdown has been the fact that we've been able to do this sort of thing from the comfort of our own homes. And I managed to get through and round so many university associations and conservative associations, and goodness me, I've just got much bigger in my screen, and across the country in a way that was possible, but just that we never really took advantage of prior to lockdown and prior to the situation that we're all living through. So it's great to be able to be with you. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Andrew. I'm the Member of Parliament for West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine. I was elected in 2017, the first Conservative Member of Parliament for my constituency as it is constituted just now, since it was created in 1997, and the first Conservative for my area since 1997, the last one being George Kynoch, when, like every other Conservative in Scotland, we were wiped out. It took us a rather long time to get back to the position that we wanted to be. But in 2017, we got 13 MPs elected, and I was lucky enough to be one of them. And since then, it's been quite a ride. It's been a period, as you will all have seen and experienced, even at debating societies across the country. It's been a period of unparalleled change and unprecedented significance for Britain and the world, not just the Brexit negotiations and everything that went on in the last Parliament and continue to go on just now, but of course the pandemic, a change of Prime Minister, and everything else that went alongside that seemed like such big news at the time, but has since disappeared into history. So, I mean, it's interesting. Why does anybody get involved or get interested or get into politics? I honestly don't know the answer to that. It's something I get asked a lot. Why did you get into politics? And I'd always been interested in politics. I grew up in a semi-political house. I think my parents were both interested, both my mum anyway, very opinionated about politics, and so you were sort of introduced to political debate. But I was a total political geek. I mean, I would rush home on a Wednesday lunchtime to watch, as it was then when I was beginning secondary schools, when I was about 12, 13 years old, William Hague versus Tony Blair, and then Michael Howard versus Tony Blair. Well, it was Ian Duncan Smith in the middle, but I didn't rush home as quickly to watch that. And from then on, really, I was interested. And I first joined the Conservative Party in 2007. I joined the Navy, and I was pretty disgusted, actually, at the way that the then Labour government were treating our armed services personnel and the armed forces in general, not just the situation in Afghanistan, where troops were being sent out to the front line with far below the requisite equipment that they needed to take the battle to the Taliban, but also the way that the Royal Navy, which I was serving in, was being run ragged. Ships that were well past their sell-by date were being put to sea far too often, and men and women were being asked to do much more than they ever should have been. So I was pretty disgusted the way the Labour Party was treating the armed forces, and having known that I'd been a Conservative for a few years, and having already voted for the Conservatives in the 2007 Scottish parliamentary election, I took the plunge and joined, primarily, I think, because David Cameron made the Tory party, attractive to people of my generation. He transformed it from the party that was attractive to my grandparents and actually made it a party that spoke to me, my generation, about the things that we cared about. And then I got really involved when I got to university, joined the in 2010 in Aberdeen, joined the Conservative Association, joined the Debating Society, and the rest is history, really. I started working for the party in 2014, Scottish referendum, led to a reinvigoration of Scottish conservatism, and that in turn led to the 2016 election to the Scottish Parliament, where we did really well. By that stage, I was working for the party in Brussels in the European Parliament, and that's where I was during the entirety of the European referendum campaign. So you can imagine working in the European Union for our party in Europe, what my position was on Brexit. But being a Democrat, I accepted the result, got on with it, and as Theresa said, we've got to make the best of it. And so I've sought to do by supporting a deal at every available opportunity, but never in any way doubting that we had to ultimately leave, and that leaving we had to demonstrate that we were in fact sovereign and independent of the European Union. Otherwise, what would have been the point of the whole thing to begin with? In Parliament, I've been privileged to serve on Work and Pension Select Committee, and I serve on the Scottish Affairs Committee, and I have also been Parliamentary Private Secretary to Matt Hancock, when he was at Culture, Media and Sport, Jeremy Wright for a very brief period of time when he took over from Matt, and then for 6 months in 2019, from January to the very last day, I was Theresa May's Parliamentary Private Secretary in number 10 Downing Street, which is a period of time I'll never forget. But don't blame me. I mean, my second day in the job was Meaningful Vote 1, but honestly, I can't take all the blame, right? And then I've been a vice chairman. Boris appointed me as one of his vice chairmen in August 2019, and that is where I remain to this day. So that's it, really. That's me. That's why I'm here. That's how I got involved, and that's what I've been doing. And I'm happy to take any questions, but Thomas, I'll let you chair.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Andrew, and welcome to a few other members who just recently joined. Feel free to switch your cameras on. It's always nice to see your faces as well. So our first question, over to Lizzie, please. You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I didn't realise I could do that myself. Hi, Andrew. Thanks again for coming. I'm the Vice President of Debate Society. Thank you. And we wanted to ask, do you have any standout advice for someone wanting to go into a career in politics, like quite a few of our members do?
Do you know what that is? Yeah, look, what's standout advice for wanting to go into a career in politics? I fell into my career in politics. I mean, that was by complete accident that I find myself where I am today. The very first election I ran for was the June 2017 general election, and I won. And the only reason I was running then was because, it's a bit of a funny story. I was sitting in the Scottish Parliament having a coffee with a good friend of mine, who's now Chief of Staff to Douglas Ross in the Scottish Parliament. And we were having coffee, and Ruth Davidson was marching past. And I'm not quite sure why, but she looked across and she just shouted across, "Bowie, my office, 5 minutes." Now, when Ruth Davidson shouts at you to be in her office in 5 minutes, you don't hang about, right? So I was literally on my feet and outside her door within 5 seconds. My heart going, thinking, what the hell have I done? What have I said? What have I tweeted? That's gonna. And she came upstairs and said, "Oh, sit down, Bowie, for God's sake." And she asked me if this was in October 2016. So she'd just become leader of the opposition in Scotland. She asked me if I would consider running for Parliament, running in the next general election. And I said, well, I mean, it's obviously something that I might consider in the future, but I'm not quite sure if I'm ready for it. And the immortal words, don't worry about it. There won't be another election for about 3 or 4 years. Of course, it's 5 months later, Theresa May walks out into the street in Downing Street and calls a snap election. And then I get a phone call from Ruth's office saying, "Are you still up for it?" And I was like, yeah. And that's how I ended up where I am today. So my advice then, if you want to get into politics, is be in the right place at the right time. No, seriously. My advice is, because you can be involved in politics at any level. It doesn't mean being elected. I've been involved in politics since 2010, when I first left the Navy and really got involved in the Conservatives campaigning, volunteering, being a party representative at quite a few levels, and then working professionally for the political organisation that is the Conservative Party. And I would just say to anybody, just get involved. It doesn't matter what political persuasion you are. You could be Labour, Lib Dem, Conservative, in Scotland Nationalist, in Wales Plaid, and you just pick up the phone, send an email, interact on social media. with the organisation, with the party, get involved, go along to a meeting, meet the movers and shakers, and just see if it's for you. And if it is for you and you are interested, then just get yourself even more involved in what's going on and what's happening. And at the first available opportunity, and he says this as somebody who didn't do this, should have, put yourself up for election, put yourself forward. That could be as a parish councillor, it could be as a county councillor, a member of a regional assembly, more and more of them cropping up across the country, or ultimately for Westminster. And just don't hold back. And don't get disheartened if you're not successful in A, your selection, or B, your election. I mean, I am in the minority, the very, very small minority of people that first election that they run and they win. The vast 99% of my colleagues have ran and lost and ran and lost in some seats that they knew they were never going to. I mean, look, for God's sake, Boris Johnson ran in the Gower in Wales. Jacob Rees-Mogg, I think, ran in North East Fife or somewhere in Fife anyway. So he was never going to. We were never going to win those seats. It's great experience. So get as much experience under your belt as you possibly can. And remember, being an MP is not the be-all and end-all. There are so many different aspects to politics that, the only advice I have is just to don't hold back, get involved, don't be shy, and put yourself forward as soon as the opportunity arises.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Not at all.
I believe John T had something he'd like to ask and follow up.
Cool.
Unmute yourself.
Hi, Andrew, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear, yeah.
Hi, I was just wondering if you ever experienced any campaigning, like nervousness, going out door knocking, if you might get a hostile reception, perhaps.
Yeah, Johnny, I'm a Scottish Conservative. If I don't get a hostile reception when I'm on a doorstep, then there's something very wrong with the world. It's not half as bad as it used to be. But when I first started campaigning for the Scottish Tory Party back in 2010, it was really tough. We had one MP and I may be wrong here, but just roughly 17 MSPs. We were vastly underrepresented at all levels, and it was thought of as being anti-Scottish to be a Tory, and we were the English party, and so doorstep after doorstep you would get a frosty reception, or even worse, a sympathetic reception. Somebody feeling sorry for you. Oh, there's another Scottish Tory. Isn't that nice? I thought they were extinct. Went out with the ark, sort of thing. That would be the sort of reception you would get. So yeah, I mean, you get used to it, and obviously, because of Brexit and passions were high over the past year or so, people that may have been a supporter before, but felt really strongly about Britain's place in Europe, for example, or in my constituency, it was Liberal Democrat for 18 years before it went to the SNP and then came to me. It was a really tough sell to tell people that here, where they voted 65% Remain, that we were being taken out of the European Union because the majority of people, and frankly in England, decided that the whole of the UK should be taken out. So it was, of course, you get a bit of animosity, and of course you get a frosty reception. But you have to accept that is going to happen. Not everybody is going to be your friend, and even people that vote for you are not always going to be 100% pleased with your voting record, of how you've acted, or what. I mean, for goodness sake, I was in a position where members of my association were questioning my loyalty, which is rather counterintuitive, when I was serving Theresa, because I was a PPS, and the majority of the party, the parliamentary party, were either explicitly or in private calling for her to go. But I stood rigidly by her side, so I think it's your duty to stick loyally by the leader, as I now do to the current Prime Minister. And so if you're going to get into politics, you're going to have to accept that not everybody is going to be your biggest fan, and you're going to have to expect to explain your position, and sometimes in great detail and great depth, with people who are not going to hold back in terms of their criticism of you. What I will say is that doesn't matter any of the reception that I've received on doorsteps, none of it comes close to the abuse that I see colleagues of mine, myself to a certain degree, receiving on social media. That's brought a whole new level of unfortunate discourse into the political arena, and I do hope that we are at some point will be able to move away from people hiding behind usernames and hiding behind a fake Twitter handle, being able to say just about anything, no matter how offensive to a person, simply because they're in elected office and hold a different view to them. So that has added a whole new layer of sadly, abuse to what was, on the whole, no matter how frosty, a relatively polite public political discourse in this country. That's probably not answered your question at all. Do I get nervous going on doorsteps? Absolutely. Is it half as nervous as I get standing up in the House of Commons? Nope. That is the most nervous you can ever be, standing up in the House of Commons, especially when you make your maiden speech. That was terrifying. Your very first speech in the House of Commons. When I did it, the place was full, because it was the second day of the Queen's speech debate in 2017, and we were debating global Britain. Of course, Boris Johnson was then Foreign Secretary. And so he was sitting on the front bench. The place was full. I think I was fifth from the end. So he was just getting ready to sum up. Everybody assumed he was going to be challenging Theresa in the not too distant future. So people piled into the chamber to see what he would say. Just as I stood up, David Davis, who was then the Brexit Secretary, walks into the chamber, stands literally about 3 meters in front of me, looking up to listen to what I was saying. And then you're supposed to stand there and speak confidently about yourself, your constituency, and everything else. That was absolutely terrifying. And that feeling of that, just the butterflies that you get when you stand up, never disappear.
Thank you. I'm not sure I'm at liberty to ask another question. Is that all right, Thomas?
It's up to Thomas. He's a boss.
Go for it.
Go for it. You said when you were being nominated to represent your constituency that Ruth Davidson summoned you into her office, and you appeared rather terrified of that. Is that something you feel still exists? Is whipping quite a terrifying subject?
Whipping. Well, I mean, I couldn't ever breach the code of telling secrets out of school about what goes on within the whip's office. As the Prime Minister's Parliamentary Private Secretary, you are a de facto whip and really an add-on to the whip's office. So I couldn't break the rules and tell you. But is it? Yeah. I mean, when you're summoned to an office, I'll tell you. Okay, when I got my first promotion, February 2018. I was. It was a Wednesday, and a couple of mates of mine from the Navy had come up to London and wanted to have a look around Parliament. They wanted to come to PMQs, have a look around Parliament, have a drink, and have a nice time in London. So they came up, PMQs. I had a question, asked my question in PMQs. They met them afterwards. They were in the public gallery, took them down to Stranger's Bar. I told my office it'd be the first Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday morning. It'd been really tough. I said, just clear the diary. I'm gonna have a drink with my mates. Wednesday afternoon, just have the day off. So ordered a couple of pints at Strangers, went outside of the terrace with my mates, and my phone starts to buzz in my pocket. What's this? It's a Deputy Chief Whip. I'm like, oh shit. So one pint in one hand, phone to the Deputy Chief Whip on the other hand. And he says, Andrew, could you come and see the Chief Whip in his office in the next 5 minutes? And of course, your stomach just drops. You're like, oh crap. What I felt when Ruth summoned me to her office times 100 was how I felt when I had that. And I said, oh, Chief Deputy, is this serious? And he goes, it's always serious. And that was it. Left it at that. So I was like, crap. So I went back to the bar industry. I was like, I have 2 cups of coffee, two double espressos, please. So I wanted to sober up incredibly quickly. A packet of mints, chucked them in my mouth, jogged up to the Chief Whip's office, where he summoned me. Andrew, have a seat. And he says, Andrew, we've been thinking we're going to be promoting some of the new 2017 intake, and we were wondering, would you like to be Parliamentary Private Secretary to Matt Hancock and DCMS? And I was just like, oh, what? And it was just sort of this moment's silence as that sort of sunk in, and the relief, sort of the cold sweat disappeared instantly. So yeah, of course, you get nervous when you get summoned into the Chief's office, but so you should. I mean, he's an incredibly important figure, and it's his job to hold the party together and win the votes time after time after time. He's under a lot of pressure, and so if you didn't have an aura about him, or you didn't have a sense of trepidation when you get called into his office, he was doing something wrong. But yes, that's the story of my first promotion, which I'll never forget. And I have to say, I've never had a pint during the day since then. On a weekday.
Okay. Thank you. That's all for now. Thank you, Andrew.
Cheers, Johnny. Thanks.
Thank you. Farah, do you have a question?
Hello, Andrew. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey,
my question is, what has been your greatest political achievement so far? And yeah, what are you most proud of achieving so far, being in office for 3 years?
Yeah, that's funny as well, because that's quite a difficult question to answer. You'd think that would be one of the easiest questions you could answer as a politician, because you'll have chalked up all your achievements and be able to just reel them off one by one. But it being such a difficult and unprecedented time in politics, it's not been you haven't had the usual period through which you can establish, I don't know, local achievements as you usually would. I would say the proudest that I've ever been was the proudest that I've ever been personally was managing to retain my seat in the 2019 election. Against all the odds in a Remain constituency with an SNP tidal wave with a much reduced majority, but still holding on. Personally, that's probably the proudest I felt at actually achieving something. Alongside that, obviously, being asked to serve the Prime Minister in Downing Street is a huge honour. And actually, I think one of the things there was, for a very long period of time, government in London didn't have to think about Scotland. It was a place that had a very strong devolved administration. The Conservative Party in particular had, as I keep saying, one MP. And so Scotland never really figured quite very high on the radar, apart from during the independence referendum period, when obviously the party and the government were focused very much on keeping Scotland in the Union. So one of the things that I think I'm most proud of achieving in government was actually reminding, when I was in number 10 anyway, reminding continually advisors, senior civil servants, SPADs, the Prime Minister herself and other ministers that Scotland existed, and that at every available opportunity you had to mention that. And over the 6 months that I had in the job, people became just more and more used to me asking in the corner of the room, probably completely out of, I shouldn't have been asking, speaking at all. And what about Scotland? And what will this mean for Scotland? Just time and time and time again. So much so that by March and April, advisors would be coming into meetings with at least a couple of bullet points on what said announcement would mean for Scotland and for my constituents. So probably politically, that's probably what I have achieved most, is an actual understanding and realization of Westminster government that Scotland exists as a part of the country that they have to care about and have to be involved in. Also, convincing Theresa and then Boris that COP26 next year, with other people, but speak in meetings, that it should be, the UK should bid for it and hold it, and secondly that it should be held in Glasgow to demonstrate our United Kingdom working together, and that not everything that comes to the United Kingdom has to happen in London. We can spread things out. The assumption was we were going to hold it at the O2 or Wembley Arena or the XL. No, I was like, no, we want to hold it. Primarily for me, I wanted it in Scotland, but why not Manchester or Birmingham or Liverpool or one of our other great cities? And so that was quite an achievement as well. One of the things I'm most proud of doing collectively, the government put enshrining net zero into legislation. We were the first member of the European Union to do that. One of the first countries in the world to do that. And have we met all of our Paris climate change goals? No, we haven't. Are we falling behind? Probably a little bit. But are we addressing that by enshrining into law something? It's now a government aim to be carbon neutral by 2050. That's incredible, and we are going further and faster than so many other countries in the world. And when Theresa took, after we passed that, when Theresa took that to the European Union, to one of the last council meetings she attended as Prime Minister, and tried to get other European countries to get on board with this, we could have a Europe-wide target, they said no, they just wouldn't do it. Obviously, Poland and other countries are still heavily reliant on coal mining, etc. But even the Scandinavian countries, which we all assume are far ahead of us, didn't come on board. So I'm very proud that we as a country have achieved that and have that in legislation. And I think tomorrow, it'll be published in my local newspaper that we're getting 100 cherry trees from Japan to plant in one of my towns locally, which has been a 3-year-long battle to get confirmed. But as a sign of Japanese British cooperation for 150 years or so, we're having these cherry trees planted. So I'm delighted. So that will be something I will also be very proud of as soon as that cherry tree gets planted in the ground. There's a few things there, and there's heaps of stuff like locally, individual. Yeah, some of the stuff I'm most proud of is what you've been able to do for constituents privately and quietly. Some people, when they come to see their MP, usually it's the last port of call. Usually you're the last person that they've gone to the agencies, they've gone to the whatever charities are available to them, and you know, you are the last door that they knock on. And when you're able to make that difference, when you're able to overturn a PIP decision or any decision by DWP, or you're able to get somebody onto universal credit that didn't think they were going to be able to get a child into a special needs school, that didn't think, these sort of things, I mean, they make the job worth it. So I'm incredibly proud of what I and my constituency chief have achieved over the last 3 years for individuals.
Is that okay, Farid? Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Owen, I think you had something Andrew touched upon. Did you want to ask the question? Or
yeah, that would be great. Thank you. So, hello, Andrew. My name's Owen. Thank you for being here today. I would be really interested to hear about your position on the devolution of Parliament, because you've talked obviously about you know, being an MP for Scotland and being
just a little bit of Scotland, not the whole of Scotland.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Of course. Clear, yeah. I mean, I'd love that. I'd be cracking, but you
know. I can see you voted mostly against for the kind of the giving of powers to the Scottish kind of Parliament more than keeping it within Westminster. I'd be really interested to hear your opinion and your point of view as to why these powers are better held within London and not within Edinburgh. Thank you.
So this is obviously what caught the Prime Minister out a couple of weeks ago, so I'm not going to fall down that rabbit hole. But look, I, like every Conservative in 1997, had I been able to vote, I was only 10 years old, and you guys weren't even born, but I was only 10 years old when the referendum on whether to create a devolved Parliament in Edinburgh was put to the Scottish people. And I, along with every other Conservative, had I had a vote, would have voted against it, for all the reasons that we gave in 1997. When we argued that it would create a centralising, top-heavy administration in Edinburgh that would work at the expense of and not for the other regions of the country. For example, my own region in the northeast of Scotland, that it would actually deprive local authorities of power and money. That, you know, and that is indeed the case, that it has done that. But I think devolution has been a success. And not only that, it is quite obviously here to stay. And when I say devolution has been a success, I don't mean in terms of the policies that have emanated from the Scottish Parliament, or the heads of the Scottish government, because unfortunately we've had now 21 years of devolved rule in Scotland. The first 8 years were Labour and Lib Dem coalition, and the last 12, 13 years have been SNP. And obviously, I would much prefer it if there was going to be a Conservative administration in Holyrood that would promote and construct policies that would work for the benefit of all parts of Scotland, for Scottish business, for Scottish taxpayers, and not work, as for the last 12 years we have had with the Scottish National Party government, against the interest of the rest of the United Kingdom and against the interest of making devolution work. Because despite the fact that I believe devolution, so the reason I believe devolution has been a success is the fact that I'm a Conservative, right? All of my instincts are to devolve power down to the lowest possible level and take power down to the people that are most affected by the decisions that are taken. My biggest argument against devolution in 1997 would have been, as I said, that in creating the powerhouse in Edinburgh, we were depriving local authorities of the power that they had then and might have had in the future. But we have created this legislature in Edinburgh, and actually political engagement in Scotland is much stronger as a result. People do feel closer to the decision makers and the people that influence most of the aspects of their daily lives. That has to be a good thing. So that's why I think that devolution has been a success. I don't think devolution in its current form is working as well as it could. I mean, if it was working, we wouldn't have seen half the battles and the fights that we have over the past year between the United Kingdom government and the Scottish government about what's devolved, what isn't devolved, about do they work together, don't they work together, is Matt Hancock going to pick up the phone to Nicola Sturgeon, what's the order of precedence, is she at the level of the Prime Minister? No, she's not, because he's the Prime Minister of the UK. Is she at level? What level is she? I mean, nobody really knows that, because the devolution settlement was a half-baked settlement produced by a Labour government that thought it was going to be empowering Scotland and Wales forever, and was going to be in power in London for a very, very long time with the majority that they had. And any issues that they had over how the thing was working would be worked out over a drama in a back room between Donald Dewar and Gordon Brown, and nobody would really worry about it because it'd be fine in the surface. Well, that's not the case. Nobody envisaged that you would have a separatist administration in Edinburgh and a conservative administration in London. And of course, they're butting heads like that. We want to make devolution work better. We want the country to work better. That's why we're having a constitutional review in terms of the situation with the House of Lords, in terms of its judicial review working in the way it should. Where does the Supreme Court, this back of the fag packet creation that Blair dreamt up on the eve of a cabinet reshuffle to get rid of the Lord Chancellor, you know what, and the judges in the House of Lords, how do all these things work? And in that, we have to look at how the devolved legislators in Scotland, Wales, and we should probably remove Northern Ireland from the equation because it's such a different kettle of fish over there, it being a result of the 1999 Good Friday Belfast Agreement. So we need to have a look at how it works. But we're never going to get to a stage of making devolution work better when one of the main actors in this this play is somebody who doesn't want to make devolution work at all. It doesn't want to make the union work at all. It wants to break the union apart. You know, they want to see devolution fail so they can say the only way Scotland can succeed is to be independent. I absolutely do not believe that is the case. I believe that Scotland's best place is within the United Kingdom. I think the United Kingdom is better off with Scotland in it, and to make sure that we continue to be in the UK for all that means, all the positivity that brings, for business confidence, for investment, for the future, for our defence, and everything else, we need to make devolution work. So devolution has been a success because it's brought power down to the lowest, closer to the people. Can it be better? Can power be put down further? Absolutely. Do we need to make it work better than it's working right now? Yep.
Brilliant, thank you. Owen, did you have a quick reply you wanted to make?
Thank you. Yeah, I want to say, yeah, thank you. It's really, really interesting to hear your point of view. I do agree that it was originally quite half-baked and not fully thought through, but at the same time, I have to say that with a plan that huge, is it possible to even think it through 100% all the time? I don't know. Again, thank you so much. It's really, really interesting to hear your point of view. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, what I would say is frustrating, you know, being a Scottish MP and you hear all your colleagues saying, standing up at Prime Minister's questions and saying, can I get a railway station, or can I have a new hospital or a new bypass? And of course, we don't get to do that because the power for creating these things lies in Edinburgh and not London. So there are downsides to it, but you know, it's one of these things. And
I agree with what you said. Yeah. Definitely. I also agree with you that I think Scotland is best with the UK, and England and Wales are better off with Scotland as well. Thank you very much.
You're absolutely right on that one.
Thank you, Owen. Jonty, I noticed you have your hand up. You should be able to speak.
Cheers. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
All right, thank you. You mentioned constitutional reform, and I was rather half-baked at the beginning. I remember Jacob Rees-Mogg last week saying that, I think he described it as Blairite fiddling or something like that with the Constitution. What exactly is the Conservative attack on the constitutional reforms?
Well, so the problem with Blair was that everything he did was half-baked. Be that the war in Iraq, you know, whether or not we were going to join the euro, you know, reform of the House of Lords, the creation of the Supreme Court, you know, the devolution settlements to Scotland. In fact, actually, it says something. The devolution settlements regarding Scotland and Wales are probably the most thought through because he didn't have that much to do with it. It was Donald Dewar and some incredibly eminent academics and scholars and then very powerful Scottish Labour MPs who commanded a lot of respect, but actually, and Civic Scotland, by that I mean the church and all that actually came up with the plans. There were still problems with it, created by Tony Blair. So the problem is that the biggest problem I have with Tony Blair, right, and I'm not his biggest critic because I think that he did a lot of good. My biggest problem is that he didn't go far enough in many respects. So he had a huge majority in 1997. He could have radically changed, for the better actually in some respects, how this country is governed. But he never followed through. So you've got House of Lords reform. Now, I don't think anybody in the right minds finds it acceptable that we have the biggest legislature, i.e. in the House of Lords, of any country in the world, apart from the People's Republic of China, right? Okay, I don't think anybody thinks it's actually that defensible that that there are still 93 hereditary peers and 12 bishops of the Church of England. And I think, frankly, everybody finds it utterly ridiculous that the only people that are elected into the House of Lords are the 93 hereditary peers who have an internal election around each other. So it's so ridiculous. Last year, Lord Thurso, who was John Thurso, who was the MP for Caithness, Sutherland, and Easter Ross until the Liberal Democrat, until the 2015 election. He had renounced his title to become a member of Parliament and then took his title back so that he could serve in the House of Lords. He had the election for him, for his place in the House of Lords between the hereditary peers, was an election between Lib Dem hereditary peers, of which there were 4, I think, 2 of whom were related to him, and the other 2 went to school with him. It's absolutely bonkers that we are in this situation that, our Parliament, our legislature, despite the fact there are some very eminent and learned people in the House of Lords who do add a lot to the process, and absolutely we need a revising chamber in the House of Lords. But it is absolutely ridiculous that we have this situation now. And so Blair's reforms, which were supposed to sweep away the hereditaries and bring in a whole new way of doing things in the House of Lords, have led to the situation now where we've got so many appointed life peers that they are bursting at the seams, and we have this ridiculous sight of hereditary peers electing each other to positions of power, to have a say and a vote on law being made in the British Parliament. So that's an example, of Blairite constitutional meddling. I genuinely believe he didn't go far enough. If they'd actually put their, I don't think they fully grasped the majority that they had, and the power that they had, and the opportunity that they had to change this country. And because they went off half-baked and never followed through, we have spent the last decade tidying up behind them, and that's why we are where we are.
Thank you. Jonty, did you want to respond quickly? There you go.
Thanks. It's interesting to hear that, because the way Jacob Rees-Mogg was saying it seems that he was taking a more traditional conservative view of it, and the fact you now attack the 92 hereditary peers, perhaps it's suggesting you're letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. Certainly, we're in a much better position now after 1997 than we were beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. But we are now, and I don't disagree with you, but we are now 23 years on from that, and so it is time for us to re-examine the situation. Maybe I am letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, but one can dream. I just do feel that there was so much that Tony Blair did that we are now having to tidy up because of, and that one of these is tidying up the situation in the House of Lords and making the devolution settlement work better between Scotland, Wales, and Westminster. But look, it's never going to be perfect, and of course Jacob takes a more traditional conservative view than I. Jacob is probably a more traditional conservative than I. And we are a very broad church, and it's absolutely great that we are able to have these debates and these discussions between members of our own party in a way that the Labour Party, as we've seen, breaks into internecine warfare. Every time they sit down and have a coffee together. So it's good that we're having these debates. Jacob probably does have a different position on it than I, but we're all on the same team, and ultimately, we all want to see this country governed better than it is governed right now. We may just have a different view of how we get to that stage.
Thank you very much. So moving to Karem for your question, please.
Hi. Sorry if I can just get it. Yeah, so my question was, what's been the hardest part about becoming an MP?
So, Karem, evening, how you doing? Loving the flags. The hardest part, it's funny because you become an MP overnight. It just happens to, because one minute you're Joe Bloggs, not recognised, going into the pub or walking down the street, and the next minute you're the member of Parliament. Like literally in the space of an hour, you go from being a candidate to being a member of Parliament for a constituency. So you don't really have the opportunity to adjust. and then by the Sunday evening, you're on a plane down to London, in my case, and by Monday you're in the House of Commons. The hardest thing to adjust to is the realization that you have no real private life anymore. Everything you do is in the public domain. I mean, you can't simply walk into a supermarket or walk down a high street without expecting to be recognized by somebody, you know, and it does take quite some getting used to get that into your head. The hardest part about being an MP is having to be away from home for four days at a time. You know, that can be really tough sometimes. I mean, yeah, you're busy, and yeah, sometimes you don't notice it, and God, I'm not complaining, it's the best job in the world. But of course, you're away from, in my case, my wife, in other people's cases, their families, and it can be quite tough. You know, and one of the great things about being an MP is that you get to take decisions that really affect people's lives, the country, and in some cases, the situation in the world, in the wider world. And it's a huge privilege to be able to do that and be entrusted to do that on behalf of constituents. But sometimes these are really, really important decisions, matters of conscience that you really struggle with, especially if your view is opposed to the view of the government on an issue, or your party if you weren't a Conservative at the minute. And so that can be tough, having to reconcile your own opinion with what is deemed by the government to be in the best interests of the government and the country, and so that can be quite tough as well. So there are a few downsides, but it is, in my view, the best job in the world and a real privilege to be doing it. So the pros outweigh the cons massively.
Thank you. That was a really good answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
So the next question is actually from me, and quite relevant to us as a debating society.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to sort of hear your views on what place you think freedom of speech has within university, what you think the bounds of freedom of speech could be, and how it should be enforced.
Oh, wow. So yeah, freedom of speech is at the core of everything we are as a country. The existence of freedom of speech, the right to say what you think and to voice your opinion, is, I think, something that we would surrender or give way on at our peril, to be perfectly honest. And if you aren't, and at universities, if you aren't free to explore, debate, be challenged by opinions which may not sit comfortably with you, then where the hell are you, going to be able to do that? Where the hell are you going to be able to challenge and be challenged, think difficult thoughts, have your own views questioned, and not be in a perpetual safe space where, heaven forbid, somebody says something that you might be offended by. It's incredibly scary, and it does worry me that across the country, we in universities length and breadth, we seem to be moving into an era where freedom of speech is the exception rather than the norm, and where no platforming can take place. Where somebody like Amber Rudd, who is about as radical as I am, is no platform by the Oxford, I think it was the Oxford Union. I mean, that's utterly crazy. We need to defend freedom of speech. I think that anybody who thinks otherwise has an ulterior motive for that. We need to be able to be challenged, particularly at universities. We need to be able to put up with understanding and recognizing that not everybody in the world is going to have the same opinion as you, and that is a good thing. That's how democracy works. Of course, I think across. My wife's Swedish, and so I take a bit of an interest in Swedish politics. And of course, I'm not comfortable with the idea of the Sweden Democrats being elected in large numbers to the Swedish Parliament. But the fact is that there are people in Sweden who agree with their views. Now, how do you beat somebody like the Sweden Democrats? Or how do you beat somebody like the AFD in Germany? Or how do you beat the Front National in France? or the BNP, as was in this country. Well, you beat them by arguing with them and challenging those views and exposing those views for the hate speech and the divisiveness and that they are and they espouse and that they represent. And you cannot do that if you no platform them. You cannot do that if you just shut them up and don't let them speak. The only way that you challenge them, question them, hear them air their frankly ridiculous loony views is by actually allowing them to speak and then challenge them on that. So freedom of speech is vitally important, not just because people, that's how you learn, and that's how frankly you become an adult, and that's frankly how democracy works, but because it's how we stop the extremes, and that is vitally important, especially in what I would describe as the Western world.
Thank you. I heard about Amber Rudd being no platform by the Oxford Debating Society, and of course, Loughborough Debating Society would always welcome Amber Rudd. We don't have a policy of no platforming people, and I completely agree with what you said. Just to sort of take a different angle, I wonder, because you mentioned about how much abuse MPs get on social media, and I think I remember seeing. I think it was a tweet about, it was a photo of your dinner, I think. And I think,
God, you're going to bring this up on me.
It's shocking, really. I just wonder, do you have an idea how social media companies could sort of, balance freedom of speech, but then obviously abuse is very different. So I wonder how you'd sort of act and sort of change that.
Yeah, there's freedom of speech and there's downright abusiveness. And, there's having a polite debate. No matter on what view you're discussing, you'd be able to, and that's one of the things that the House of Commons actually demonstrates. That's why we speak in the third person. That's why everybody is an honourable member, because you can take a contrary, a completely polar opposite view to something, or somebody on the opposite bench, but you do so with respect and civility, and that's what's lost in the discourse on social media at the minute. Some of the responses to the picture of my dinner that evening were incredible. I mean, it was the day we were passing the fisheries bill into law, and so I thought, well, what better thing to celebrate that by having a plate of British fish and chips? Well, maybe I should learn not to take a picture of the House of Commons dining room fish and chips, which it was a nice piece of battered fish with, yes, okay, only 6 chips, but they were big chips, right? They were huge. I challenge anybody to eat more than 6 of those chips. And of course, for some reason, it just obviously hit a chord and went viral. And, of course, there are some people out there that don't think that MPs should eat ever. Other people that don't think the House of Commons should be cooking food. So it was the wrong thing to do. But the abuse was quite incredible, really. And is only an iota of what some of my colleagues get. I get quite a lot. I become sort of immune to it. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because maybe you shouldn't become immune to it, because if you become immune to the abuse, then people will just carry on doing it. But I'm by no means the most targeted on social media. Kirstine Hare, who was my colleague and neighbour in Angus, she routinely got horrific abuse, much of it predicated on the fact that she was a blonde woman in politics. And it was disgusting. And I know that I don't know if she struggled personally with it, but certainly reading it made me feel uncomfortable. So what can social media companies do? It's difficult because, as I've just said, we need to protect freedom of speech, and people should be allowed to offend and shock and be challenged. But I think when people use abusive language, or when it's quite obvious when something moves from the sphere of challenging your views on a political issue or on an issue to being, frankly, bullying, as some of it is, then I think it's quite obvious. And I think that the social media companies then have a responsibility to, I wouldn't say censor or monitor, but take more seriously the issues that are brought up by constant abuse of people in public office, and the effect that it has on and the corrosive effect on democracy, not just because it affects the language of debate, but because it puts off so many people from getting involved who frankly think, why should I want to put up with this sort of abuse? I've done nothing wrong personally. I'm a good guy or a good girl, So it's I think they should take it more seriously. I think they should take action more readily to combat it. As I said, it's not easy because when do you cross that line from becoming censoriousness and killing off freedom of speech. It's difficult, but there is a line, and you can see the line, so it might not be that hard. That didn't answer your question at all. Sorry, Thomas.
Yeah, my local MP, Tracy Crouch, she was talking about this in one of the meetings I went to her with, and she actually said that she had to get actual security guards to sort of look after her children because of the abuse that.
Yeah, no, Tracy got it really bad, and women do get it worse than men. It's a disgrace. I don't know why that is, other than the fact that, you know, some idiots out there think some cowards, frankly, hide behind, as I said, a screen and a Twitter handle and think they can say what they like. And you know, Tracy is not the only colleague of mine that's had to have, you know, police. And I had security put in my house when it got really bad during the Brexit debate. So because I didn't like the idea of leaving my wife at home whilst I was 600 miles further away down. I mean, I'm not really bothered about myself, but it's your family that you feel for. So yeah, that's another reason why people get put off going into politics, because they worry about the effect that it might have on their family.
Mm-hmm. Lizzie just wanted to add something. Go for it, Lizzie.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. So you mentioned platforming people such as AfD and the BNP and such, but would you not say that they kind of have a culture of abusive language and such, and platforming such groups can kind of lend itself to a culture of violence and kind of embolden people with, I think, unacceptable views now, and there becomes a point where you have to say, no, we shouldn't platform these people because it's in fact doing more harm than good.
No, absolutely. Yeah, there is a point that you say no more. Absolutely not at all. But if it gets to a stage where a group is garnering a level of public support, despite the fact that you find their views repulsive and offensive, I think it's only right and proper that that group gets the opportunity to air their views. And I sort of look at Nick Griffin, and leader of the BNP, when he was invited. I don't know if you remember, he was invited to go into Question Time one evening, and David Dimbleby and the Question Time audience and the other panelists spent an entire hour, and it probably wasn't very fair, but they spent an entire hour questioning him, interrogating him on his views and the views of the British National Party. And by the end of it, he was a laughingstock. And I'm not going to say there's a direct correlation between his appearance and the BNP's collapse at the polls, but there's certainly one followed the other quite swiftly after. And that is an example of how platforming somebody can actually lead to an exposure of why a group is just frankly ridiculous in terms of what they actually support or believe, or why their views are so abhorrent. Because some people might feel themselves drawn into supporting a party, for example, in Sweden, the Sweden Democrats, because they will come across very politely on the doorstep, and they'll say, well, do you think that there are too many immigrants coming into Sweden? So, well, actually, probably I do. And they say, well, is that because there is a real pressure on the welfare state in Sweden right now, because we've taken in so many people from Syria and Iraq, and your average person, you're very normal, would never consider themselves racist in any way. Suburban Stockholmite might go, you know what, actually, yeah, there is a pressure on the welfare state. Maybe, well, if you vote for us, we'll do something about that. Okay, I'll go and vote. But if you know, by platforming the Sweden Democrats, by putting them onto a program such as Question Time, you can expose them for who they really are and what they actually believe, and that will, I think, would put people off voting for them if they found out how extreme they were. So that's why I think platforming is very important. Why no platforming actually serves the opposite purpose of actually not exposing the worst in our society to the views that they actually hold.
Mm-hmm.
I might be wrong. God, you challenge me. I don't mind. I mean, that's the whole point of freedom of speech, is that you're allowed to ask. I think I'm completely speaking nonsense.
Yeah, I worry sometimes that allowing like really far right radical views to fester, or even some things that we would consider non-PC could infringe on other people's rights to express themselves, because if you beat people down so much, then they feel as though they cannot come forwards and express their views because they feel unsafe and such.
Look,
and it's something we've found difficult as a society. I think Thomas might mind me saying, the line between allowing free speech and then it infringing on other people's safety, really.
Absolutely. You know what? Absolutely. Of course it's difficult. Of course it's difficult, but democracy is difficult, right? Living in a free society is difficult, and it's, you know, it means difficult choices, and it means you have to make that decision of where do we draw the line. You know, and I mean, I'm not saying that we should allow the KKK to take part in that. I mean, and that's where you draw the line. Well, that's what you can't do that. I'm like, well, yes, I can. I can draw the line. That's what we're allowed to do in this. But then at the other end, it's like, well, you know, do you allow? And this is, you know, to many people, the Roman Catholic Church's views on homosexuality or abortion are deeply offensive to who they are. But are we saying that we should no platform the Roman Catholic Church, a faith, a belief, a religion to which millions of people in this country, and even more so across Europe, adhere to and believe? Well, no, you're not. But then, so what do you mean you draw the line there but not there? And but that's what you have to do. That's the difficulty of living in a free society and a democracy. You have to make those decisions. So
what would you say your opinion on like the government's role in protecting free speech would be? Like how big should that role be, or should we leave it down to individual organizations to make that call?
So we're living in a really strange time when the government, I was about to say, as a conservative, I believe the government should have a smaller role in people's lives as possible. But right now we're telling people literally who they can hug on Christmas Day. So that obviously isn't the currency of the moment. But to take us into normal times, we will be in again very soon, I firmly believe. I do believe that the government should have a smaller role as possible. And that our role is to set out, in layman's terms, to set out the guidelines in which society should operate. And when you cross that boundary, when you cross that guideline, when you break the law, be that you know, grossly offended somebody, being racist, you know, homophobic or whatever, that's a line that's crossed. Government has determined that that's what the line is, and if you cross that, then you. But in terms of determining who gets platform, no platform, you know, at university level, that should be very much down to the individual educational establishment or student union or, you know, debating society or whatever it is. I don't think the government should be getting involved in that. We should be promoting free speech, absolutely. That's the job of a government in any democratic country, but we shouldn't be in the role of policing what goes on in individual campuses, for God's sake. That's surely students and lecturers and university bodies are capable of doing that themselves. And if they decide to no platform, I find that worrying, and I think we should be working to argue against that, and government should use all the levers it can, the platform that it has, which is huge, to say why no platforming Amber Rudd in this instance is a bad idea. But if that's the choice that the students and that association has made, then that's the choice they've made, and that's again one of the difficulties that come from living in a free society.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Over to Oliver.
Or not.
Hello, sorry. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, it's loud and clear. Hi, Oliver.
Yeah, all right, brilliant. So I'd just like to thank you again for coming as the treasurer of the society. It's been very good to hear your insight so far, definitely really interesting.
Thank you.
So as you mentioned earlier, you were elected in 2017 and my question's based around that. So you won with quite a comfortable 8,000 vote majority. And obviously you were the first Conservative MP for your constituency since 1997. So I just wondered, why do you think your victory was so decisive, especially in a year where the Tories failed to gain a majority?
Well, I mean, I could say it was because I was a terrific candidate, and the people of West Aberdeen, Carrick and Carden determined that, you know, by a mile I was the best representative that they could possibly have in Parliament, but that would be bullshit. So that's absolutely not the case. Look, a lot of reasons. I mean, one, we fought very hard You know, we campaigned, you know, from dawn till dusk, beyond dusk, every single day of the election campaign. Two, there was a move in Scotland, a unionist, if not conservative, resurgence against a domineering, swaggering, overconfident SNP administration in Edinburgh, and that seemed to be out of touch with the lives of ordinary Scots and the priorities that they had. There was we had, you know, in our leader in Scotland, in Ruth Davidson, an incredibly popular, fantastic communicator, who was able to sell what we believed in and what we wanted to do to parts of Scotland and parts of, you know, in my constituency that hadn't voted Conservative for over 20 years. You know, in Theresa May, but ironically enough, although of course we did actually achieve our largest ever vote share in that election, it's just that Labour got more as well, and so therefore the gains were less evident. You know, she was an incredibly popular Prime Minister in Scotland in comparison to some others, and she appealed. I don't know quite what it was. You never put your finger on these sort of things, but the Scottish people, she appealed to the Scottish people. And in the northeast of Scotland in particular, where I'm from, there had been a pervasive feeling for quite a few years actually that government in Edinburgh had taken it for granted. It had the central belt of Scotland had benefited from the largesse of Holyrood, which had been as a result of tax receipts and revenue created by the oil and gas industry based in the northeast of Scotland. We had been a net contributor to the Exchequer in London, and then obviously to Edinburgh for decades, and didn't seem to be getting anything back from it. And so this all sort of culminated. You know, and you know what, we ran a really good local campaign, and add into that the SNP MP who had just been in power I'd elected for 2 years. I'm not going to criticize him personally, but his name recognition wasn't great. You know, people didn't really know him as their MP. So all of those reasons and more, you know, who knows why, really, at the end of the day, people vote how they do. It's very easy to go out and ask them, but, you know, they'll give you a myriad of reasons. We ended up with 7,900 votes, which was the third largest Conservative majority in Scotland. And yeah, that's, you know, I honestly, I mean, that's really all of those reasons and more, I think. I forgot to mention one of the key ones, Jeremy Corbyn's popularity as well. We had, I would knock on a door of somebody that had been canvassed as a Scottish National Party supporter, and they would tell me that they were voting for Jeremy Corbyn, and I'd punch the air in delight because that was one less SNP, and the Labour Party hadn't got a hope in hell of winning my seat. And so one less SNP meant a slightly bigger majority for me. That obviously was not the case in 2019, and 2019 was a very different election for me. I went from having a 7,900 majority to having an 843 majority. And that was, again, it was a very different election. Brexit was the dominant issue. We didn't have Ruth Davidson. You know, the SNP were resurgent. The Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party united behind them. You know, the Labour vote went down. I'm taking the numbers from my head, 7%. The SNP vote went up 8%. Direct correlation. Our vote held pretty steady. I went down by just shy of 2,000, which in the 2019 election in Scotland, in a Remain seat, was pretty good. But my majority went down from 7,900 to 800. So, you know, it was the increase in the SNP vote rather than the loss of the Conservative vote last time that meant I was here. As I said, the fact that I'm still here in a Remain voting seat, which had been Liberal Democrat for nearly 20 years, the resurgent SNP, is something I'm very, very proud of.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much.
That's all.
Thank you, Oliver. I just wanted to check, Andrew, we have you for about another half an hour or so.
That's absolutely fine.
Brilliant, thank you. We're going to come to Owen now for a slightly different question.
Cool.
That was my fault.
That's it, all right. Right. So yeah, this is.
I thought it would have been no platform. I was getting worried. I was worried about freedom of speech at Loughborough.
So this is quite different, but it's something that I wanted to talk to. Well, I was considering talking to my MP about it, but this seems like a brilliant time to bring it up. So I own a car and I can drive, but I would love to be able to use an electric scooter like I did when I visited Paris last year.
Yeah.
At the moment, if I use one, I'm facing potentially 6 points on my driving license and a fine on top. And I know that this is starting to change. And these laws did come from a place where it wasn't specifically about electric scooters, it was about anything on the road that didn't have a registration plate.
Yes.
And special cases were made for bicycles because of how long they've been around.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you how quick, because I know they will change. So how quickly do you think that we're going to be allowed to have private scooters, not on the pavement, but in bike lanes and on the road? Do you think it will happen? And if you do think it will happen, how soon?
Have you asked for one for Christmas? Is this why you're very concerned about this? Is this?
I can't risk buying one at all until the laws change, because I'm a new driver. So 6 points for me means no car, which means I can't go to work anymore.
Yeah, mate, you're speaking to somebody that had 9 points in his license at one stage, so I know full well about, you don't want to be anywhere near them.
Absolutely.
Look, to answer your question, we're running pilot schemes right now. It's the government's intention at the minute, the government's intention to legalise electric scooters and to allow them on the roads. In terms of when that's going to be, I mean, in due, I think the phrase common currency in the government right now is it will become legal in due course, which between you and me, Owen, could be between now and the next election. But it is our intention to make them legal. I can't give you a concrete date because I'm not in the Department for Transport, so I'm not actually involved in the pilot project. But I can find out for you if you want me to, and let you know how it's going. And I'll pass on to Thomas, who's obviously been in touch to set this up, any information I get back. So a friend of mine, it does work in the Department for Transport, so I'll find out for you how the pilot's going and let you know.
That would be absolutely fantastic. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Not at all.
Thank you.
Yeah, Owen, I'm happy to email and sort that out for you.
Cool.
And you can start riding around your scooter.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so.
Okay, Halima, you had a question as well.
Okay. Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself for a minute. Okay. Can you hear me?
Hey, Halima, you're really quiet, Halima, can you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, just had to clear my throat. Okay, sorry, I'm Halima. I'm
nice to meet you.
I'm the secretary from the Debate Society,
cool.
And I'm really glad that you're here because I never spoke to any MP before, so it's really insightful. I wanted to ask, last month, many MPs voted against funding free school meals over the school holidays until Easter 2020. Can you explain your position on your vote?
Yeah, yes, I can. Well, Halima, very nice to meet you. I hope this doesn't put you off speaking to any other MP in the future. It's a difficult. We did vote against extending free school meals across the holidays. There's no getting away from that. That's what the motion was, and that's what we did. But it was just that. It was an opposition day motion. It wasn't actually legislation. Nothing changed as a result of the vote because the process, I think the Labour Party get, I think, about 9 or 10 opposition days, what they call them opposition days a year, where they get to introduce a motion essentially challenging the government's position on an issue. And it being politics, and we would do exactly the same if we were in their position. They choose positions that will make the government feel uncomfortable, and this time they chose free school meals, and so they achieved their aim. They made us feel incredibly uncomfortable. The fact is, yes, we did vote against it, but at that point we had also just announced £64 million extra of funding to local authorities to spend, as they saw fit. And this could have included, if that local authority had deemed it to have been a priority, free school meals in secondary schools. We were also, at the same time, although we didn't make enough of this as we should have done, and this is some people question, when things go wrong in government, or when bad decisions are taken, is it cock up or conspiracy? Well, it's almost 99.9% cock up, because or communication failure, because as we were voting, there was ongoing in the Department of Education and in the Department of Work and Pensions work on really expanding, a multi-million pound investment and expansion into school clubs and holiday clubs, through which children can attend, get fed a hot meal, learn, all the rest of it in schools across England. And so for all those reasons, because all that was going on in the background, and because the government, as a matter of principle, does not vote for an opposition day motion, because we simply cannot vote with the Labour Party on an opposition day motion, nor can we just allow it to pass, because then they will press for it to become legislation. So it becomes very complicated. We voted against it. Did we make the right call in voting against it? Controversially, I think we did. Did we explain our reasons for doing it? No. And were we rightly castigated for the decision that we made? Absolutely. Is it the right thing now that we've announced an over £100 million expansion into school clubs and holiday clubs and free school meals and holidays for kids that attend? Absolutely, yes, it is. Is it right that we have left local authorities and devolved administrations such as Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland to determine whether they can give free school meals? Yes, because as I said at the beginning, we were talking about devolution. The decisions should be made by people as close to the level of people that it affects as possible. But should we ever be in a position again where we can have the finger pointed at us saying that you're starving school children and not have a good enough answer as to why we voted the way that we did? No, we absolutely should not. It was not our finest hour. I don't think anybody would agree it was. But we are where we are, and that's the reason that I voted that I did.
Yeah, thank you. I just wasn't really aware of all the politics that goes behind it. Yeah. I think especially in my area, it's like immediately when it was, when they said Conservative voted against it, it was just, of course they did. It was just, it was. Of course you thought that, and of course that was how it was perceived,
because we did. Yeah. I mean, there's no, as I said, there's no getting away from it. I could sit here and and try and say that I didn't vote against free school meals for children. And of course, I didn't vote against any legislation that would have given free school meals for children. But was my vote chalked up as somebody who voted against free school meals? Yes, it was. And there's no point in me trying to defend, trying to get myself out of that position. I can only defend why I took the decision that I did, and that's where I was, Selima. Should we get ourselves into that position again without a good enough reasoning for it? No. But also, actually, I should just say, despite all of that, some of the abuse that some of my colleagues got in the wake of that, you can challenge us on a position. You can absolutely castigate the government for its policy on free school meals for children. You can say what you like about the policy, but when it gets personal, I'm not accusing anybody here doing that, for goodness sake, not at all. But some of the things that were being said and done to my colleagues and my colleagues' staff, by the way, who aren't paid very much, many of them part-time, either young or older, semi-retired individuals that work in constituency offices, being threatened in the streets, having graffiti put on windows. This sort of thing is not where we need to be if we're going to have a sensible, mature, and rational political debate. So I think that just goes back to one of the earlier comments about political discourse on social media. But in terms of your original question, great question. I am, it is what it is, and hopefully we've addressed the issues now.
Yeah, thank you for your answer.
Not at all.
Okay, John, to your question.
Thank you. Hello again, Andrew. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. What will be the main challenges involved in the process of preventing Scottish independence, do you think?
Right, I'm glad you kept such an easy question till late on, John T. Look, the main challenge is demonstrating to the average Scot on the street that they benefit and Scotland benefits from being a part of the wider United Kingdom. That's a lot more difficult than it first appears, because for 20 odd years now, the government of relevance to them has been the government in Edinburgh. It's controlled almost every aspect of everyday life in Scotland, from health to education to transport infrastructure to even rollout of broadband. The UK government has been notable by its absence, and so to the average Scot who doesn't, unlike like me, run away to England to join the Royal Navy or spend 4 days out of 5 working in London and sees himself very much as the epitome of British because he's lived and worked and moved across the whole United Kingdom. The average person in Scotland, just like the average person in England, doesn't move that far away from where they've gone to school or grown up or gone to university, and they stay within Scotland. So how do you explain to the average Scot, the average person, that they benefit from being a part of this wider United Kingdom, where you can talk about the great opportunities that young people get through the ability to work with and do research with and explore things alongside our great educational institutions across the United Kingdom. You can talk about the fact that we have great influence in the world, be that on the UN Security Council or the G7 or a founder member of NATO, that Scotland's voice is heard in all these places because it is a part of the United Kingdom. We can talk about the fact that people's tax rates are lower because we shoulder the burden as a wider UK. And so people in Scotland aren't taxed hard to pay for essential public services as they would be in an independent Scotland, because what Scotland receives in benefit from, not in benefit, but in money from the Treasury, as opposed to the money that it gives in tax receipts, one outweighs far more than the other. We can talk about the ease with which Scottish business can work with, trade with, interact with businesses across the rest of the country. We can talk about the fact that Scottish trade, over 60% of trade from Scotland is sold to England, and we don't want any barriers to that to be thrown up, invisible as they may be. We can talk about the family links, the relationships that we have. All of us have got families scattered over these islands, and the deep history between us. The fact that we stood together alone to fight Nazism, we were at the forefront of the fight against communism, that together in the 1980s under Margaret Thatcher, we reinvented this country and reinvented the economy and moved forward to create a Greater Britain that is now still sitting at the 5th largest economy in the world. We can talk about the contribution that Scotland makes to climate change debate, the fact that it's actually ahead of where England is, but working together, how the United Kingdom is moving towards meeting its climate change targets as set in Paris. There's so many things we can talk about that Scotland benefits from being a part of the wider United Kingdom. But if we don't do that and we don't start talking about those positives now, then we're going to lose. And that's quite clear. We've got a real battle on our hands, because you know what? Nobody's actually going out and saying all those things with a smile on their face, positive. And it's not about saying you can't be a very proud Scot and have Scotland still benefiting from its membership of the UK. Nobody is saying that. You have to be able to say that. And I am a very proud Scot, and I'm equally proud to be British. But you have to be. Somebody has to start making the arguments, all those arguments that I've just made, doing it with conviction and with passion, the same conviction and passion that Nicola Sturgeon and co have when they talk about how easy and how great it will be if Scotland will be independent. And it's very important also to say to Scotland that the argument isn't that Scotland could not be a successful small independent European country. Of course it could. It's got everything that and more that some countries in the world would want. But why would you risk it? Why would you risk losing what you have as a part of this greater whole, just to be an independent Scotland, when you have so much power right now as a devolved part of this greater country? So look, that's the sort of thing we've got to start saying. I hope that answers your question, Jonty.
It seems to me that the arguments that might be made in a second referendum, whether that comes in 2022 or something like that, seems to be very similar to the arguments made for staying within the European Union. And I wonder whether some people might see a contradiction in that.
I hope you wouldn't notice that one. Yeah, look, you could have taken every single thing I said there and replaced the word Scotland with UK and replaced the UK with the Europe, and you would have had the Remain campaign's pitch in 2016. So I get it. I absolutely get it. It's a tough sell, especially as the people that are selling it are the party that is taking the UK out of the European Union, and the majority of its members voted for Britain to leave the European Union. So we're using the arguments that the Remain camp used, but I don't care, frankly. It's a very different question for me. The European Union was we were members of the European Union for 40 years. It was a political and a trading and an economic union, sorry. We're talking about who we are. You know, I am British, right? To vote for Scottish independence would take away a part of who I actually think I am as a person. My nationality would be altered as a result. This is a much bigger question than whether Britain should remain a member of a club it only joined 40 years ago. Our union is 313 years old, you know, and we've achieved a lot in those 313 years. Are the arguments very similar? Yes, they are. But is this a much bigger issue than our membership of the European Union? You better believe it is.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
We have a written question now from a member, and they're interested to know your thoughts on the trade deal that was being struck between the UK and the US, and whether Biden is going to have any influence on that, and just your thoughts on that, basically.
So, you know, I'm going to put my cards on the table here and say I was absolutely delighted that Joe Biden won the presidential election. Although, you know, I would describe myself as a Bush-Reagan Republican. You know, I'm a Republican of the old school that probably looks and sounds and does a lot of stuff that conservatives would look and sound and agree with. I thought Donald Trump was a disgrace as president of the United States. I think he demeaned the office more than anything else. I think actually there's a difference between actions and words, but sometimes words speak louder than actions. His record, Trump's economic record was pretty good. You know, the stock market had never been higher. That's a fact. Unemployment had never been lower. That's a fact. More African Americans in work than ever before. That's a fact. The economy in America soaring. That's a fact. Tax cuts. That's a fact. All good stuff. But I'm sorry, you cannot speak and act the way that he did whilst holding the office of President of the United States, and I still believe leader of the free world. And so for those reasons, not because I was a massive Joe Biden fan, but for those reasons, I am very pleased that Joe Biden is going to be the next president of the United States, because I think it will return a sense of reason, rational thought, and normality to the White House, and also because Joe Biden is an old-fashioned Atlanticist, interventionist who wants America to look outwards and lead the world. It's very good for the United Kingdom, because we want an active NATO. We want a G7 organization that is leading the world and talking about the big challenges that we face, be that climate change or the refugee crisis around the Mediterranean. You know, we want to work with a United States that will intervene with us on the big issues of our time. And we want a leader of the free world, and we want somebody in the White House that understands the importance of the special relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States of America. Now, a lot was made of the fact that Joe Biden is a Boston Irishman, to use the old phrase. He's got his family are Irish, as I think 99.9% of Caucasian American claim that their families are from Ireland. The other 1.1% claim that their families are Scottish. But you know, we'll move on from that. But he really does have strong family links to Ireland, and so a lot of people looked at that and thought, well, he's going to take the European Union side against Britain, and because he's a Democrat, and because he's close to Obama, he's going to hate Brexit, and he won't engage with Boris Johnson and this government that's taking Britain out of the EU. Well, that's utter nonsense. I mean, Boris was the second world leader that President Biden or President-elect Biden called after Justin Trudeau, who it would be rather impolite for him not to call, given that he's his next door neighbour. So that sort of demonstrated that there is no diminution of the place of Britain in the eyes of the White House. And I think that Joe Biden will recognise that it's not only in the interest of maintaining the special relationship and all that we bring to the table, but also in the economic importance for the economic importance of the United States to strike a trade deal with the United Kingdom. I think that we have got just as much to be positive about in terms of this relationship regarding a trade deal as we did under the Trump administration. What we have to be even more positive about is that we have some sense of where this White House may be going, Whereas under its previous occupant, or its still current occupant, you didn't have a clue what was going to happen from one day to the next. So a period of stability and rational thought in the Oval Office is what the world, the Western world, desperately needs, and that is definitely in Britain's interest.
Thank you. I completely agree. And Vincent, you had a follow-up question.
Yeah, I did. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So you mentioned that one of the reasons you enjoy Joe Biden being president-elect is a return to normalcy and a return to the status quo. Do you not have some concerns about the fact that the status quo and what normalcy is part of what produced Trump in the first place?
Yeah, I do, 100%. I also happen to believe that Hillary Clinton was the worst possible candidate that the Democrats could have put up to fight Donald Trump in 2016. I mean, she epitomized everything that Middle America disliked about the East and West Coast elites, that they saw as having dominance over their lives, and espousing and representing, epitomizing everything that globalization was, for whom so many people, so many people felt they had missed out on. So yeah, of course I feel I said, but you know what? No, I don't feel a sense of worry. Do I think that Donald Trump was the wrong person to put in the White House? Yes. Do I think he did damage to America's credibility on the world stage? Yes. Do I think that the people who felt they were left behind by globalization and ignored by the elites in Washington shouldn't have been able to have their voice or their feelings expressed? No, of course they should. That's democracy. My own opinion is that a return to the status quo in Washington is good for the world and good for Britain. I'm not fearful of a second coming of Donald Trump. I'm not fearful of somebody else inheriting that mantle and challenging Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or whoever it is in 4 years' time, because that's how democracy works. You just need the idea, the people with the ideas that I hold dear. I just think they should be championing what they believe in and doing that effectively. And if they do that properly, then they will win. But you shouldn't fear your opposition. So I don't fear Donald Trump, and I don't fear the fact that the so-called Middle America voted for him because they felt left behind by the elites. And I don't really worry, because I don't think Joe Biden is, although it's a return to the status quo and normalcy in terms of how the White House operates, and for Britain, I think he will be clever enough and savvy enough to recognize that he needs to speak to all of America if he's going to be successful. And if he is going to, well, I don't know if he's going to go for a second term, but if Kamala Harris or whoever is going to be the president after that, and who knows, by that stage I might be supporting the Republican candidate if that Republican candidate speaks to the values that I hold dear. This is not about Democrat Republican. It's about what I think is in Britain's best interest, and I think a return to normalcy is in Britain's best interest.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. So we'll have one more question, final question then. So hopefully it's an optimistic one. So the pandemic has obviously caused a lot of gloom. A lot of people are, worried, right?
Thomas, can I just stop you? Really interesting question just popped up at the bottom there from Stanley. Ross Stanley Ipkiss Webb. Do you believe that Brexit is the beginning of the end for Europe? I really hope not. I don't think. I mean, I vote to remain. I do think it's right that Britain's coming out now. Britain was never comfortable in Europe, and Europe was never really comfortable with Britain in it. I hope that the European Union can actually continue to be a success, and I hope that without us there, holding it back to a certain degree, it can go on. And if it wants to proceed with its European project in terms of great integration, that's absolutely good. Britain needs a successful and economically successful Europe for it to succeed also. And so I wish the European Union all the best. I hope that Brexit doesn't mean the beginning of the end for it. I think that our place as being its biggest friend, biggest ally, biggest champion, and the bridge between America and the European Union. But I really hope that Brexit doesn't, presage a rush to the door, because that would be very bad for Europe, for Britain, and for the wider world. Anyway, sorry, I thought I would just answer that question.
we seem to have come to a quick fire round. I hope that's okay, Ross. Yeah, just finally, obviously the pandemic has created a lot of gloom. People are worried. So I wonder, what are you looking forward to about the future? What are you excited for?
Scotland being its first international football tournament since 1998 next year in Euro 2021. That's definitely what I'm looking forward to. I was 11 years old the last time Scotland played the World Cup, and 9 years old the last time you were in the European Championship. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing Scotland beating England at Wembley in July. And what else am I looking forward to? Goodness me, I'm looking forward to not having to worry about whether I've forgotten or not forgotten a mask before I walk into a supermarket. I'm looking forward to being able to hug my nieces again, who I haven't been able to since haven't seen because they're in Sweden since last December. I'm looking forward to being able to travel again, without restrictions. I love foreign travel. I absolutely, it's one of the things I really enjoy, and there's something to be said when you're in my line of work for stepping on a plane, stepping off somewhere, and realizing that nobody in where you are has the faintest clue who you are or what you do as a job, and they don't happen. As has happened to me a few times, even in England, sitting as my face comes up on TV, and a couple of people in the bar sort of turning and looking at me in the corners. I sort of that. So I'm looking forward to traveling again. I'm looking forward to being able to just call up a mate and say, do you want to go for a pint, and just go to the pub without having to book a substantial meal beforehand. Going to the football, I talked about being Scotland Euro 2020, but God, I miss going to the football. I'm looking forward to so essentially, Thomas, I'm looking forward to the day that we actually beat coronavirus. I'm looking forward to the day that a majority of people who need the vaccine in this country have gotten it, so we can get back to normal. Not just for the serious economic and societal reasons, because I look forward to the day that life just gets back to boring and normal. And when I actually think there's, it's been utterly horrible this year. I mean, really has, for so many reasons. And one of the good things I think that might come out of it will be that we will be able to look back at a time, I hope, and remember when, we weren't able to enjoy the freedoms that we all just took for granted. And we won't just take for granted the fact that we can go and act and do as we so please. And I hope that we realize genuinely how lucky we are to live in a country where we can, when these restrictions are lifted, within the law and with responsibility, say, act, do, and enjoy ourselves within the law, as much as we please. And I cannot wait for that day when we can return to that place. And I think, yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to, and it can't come too soon.
Thank you. I think all of us as well, especially as students, would look forward to the day.
Guys, I don't know. I mean, geez, this year excuse my French, but it's been a total shitter for you guys. I mean, honest to God, really, being at university in 2020 must be, an interesting experience. And so, fair play to you all. The thoughts are genuinely with you. When people complain about the younger generation, to me, I would turn to them and say, you talk about the generation that's has been hit hardest by coronavirus. Job prospects, job market has completely stopped. House prices are out of reach. Universities, not what it was in any stretch, and people had the last months of school life taken away from them. So I will hear no complaints about the next generation, the young generation. I think you guys are doing an incredible job, just be powering on through as you are. The fact that you're still doing events like this, that the Debating Society in Loughborough is still going ahead, the fact that you're still attending university and doing it like that, incredible. That the strength of will to just carry on and do that with the hope that next year is going to be better is, you've got my full respect, and I think everybody should recognise that, and that we owe you guys, and we owe your generation a huge amount when we come out the other side of this.
Thank you. And just before we wrap up, I think we'd all extend our thanks for your time this evening. I know there's quite a few members as well who wanted to attend but had other commitments today, but we'll be able to share your answers, and they'll look forward to hearing that. We'd also like to take back in the day we could take a photo, but now it's a screenshot. So
yes.
If you guys want to switch your cameras on and be in the little photo, the little screenshot, and get your best smiling faces ready.
Hold on a second. Just
Ross, Owen, Stefano, any of you got hands? Yeah, Owen's going for it. All right. So if everyone just wants to, I guess we do it in 3. So 3, 2, 1, cheese. Perfect.
Great.
That's lovely. So yeah, that really brings us to the end of our time with you.
Well, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it. Genuinely, really enjoyed some really good questions, and I wish all of you all the best for whatever the future holds over the next academic year. And yeah, have a great Christmas and a good one New Year when it comes. Seriously.